Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Is this thing, my mic'd up? Is this on? Everybody can hear me okay? I don't think this is on. I can definitely speak up, but this is not on.
It's just for the video.
Oh, it's just for the video. Okay. Well, then I will enunciate and all those terms that mean getting my voice all the way back there. How are you all doing this morning? So you're from all over the country, is that correct? Not the world, the country, right? You're okay. Excellent. Well, welcome. I am happy to be here. I actually live in Berkeley, California, so for me it's a quick BART ride over here. Berkeley, yeah.
Go Bears.
So anyway, yeah, I've got a lot to talk about, so I might as well get started. My name is Josh Karyevsky. I'm the CEO of Industrial Logic. We are, you could call us dinosaurs of the Agile world. We've been doing this Agile stuff since the 1990s, all over the world, helping lots of companies learn Agile, learn Lean, and pushing the limits of it as far as we possibly could. So we're very much involved in modern software development. What really makes a difference to you building great software. This is something that we've been experimenting with now for several years, and I'm calling it Anzeneering. You're going to learn what that means, and let's just get started. So first off, I have to have this ubiquitous slide about the Golden Gate Bridge, because here you are in San Francisco. And this is kind of scary because you could think this is going to be a really boring talk, because here he is showing a boring picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, what is he doing? This is going to be the wrong talk for me. No, it's not. Actually, we're going to talk about the Golden Gate Bridge. We're going to go back to the 1930s. And this guy here, Joseph Strauss, was the chief engineer for the Golden Gate Bridge. Turns out the Golden Gate Bridge has some lessons for us in software development. Here's what it looked like back then. This was the Depression in the US, right? The Depression, the early 1930s. They actually fought for several decades over even whether they should build this thing and whether it was feasible. It was a 1.7 mile span across this part of the ocean, the bay. But they did eventually decide to do it, and they got a budget of about $35 million to do it. Okay. Now back then, the average fatality rate on large construction projects was 1 death for every $1 million spent. So you would basically imagine about 35 deaths to build a Golden Gate Bridge. However, Joseph Strauss had a different philosophy. He wanted to go for 0 injuries, 0 deaths, and he was really serious about it. So he set things up so that it was extremely safe for the construction workers. They didn't really have helmets back then, right? Miners had helmets, so they had to adapt a miner's helmet for bridge construction. They basically said, if you're not harnessed, you're fired, right? If you don't follow our safety procedures, you will be fired on the spot. There was one particular guy, he was very competent, but he was ignoring the safety principles. Joseph Strauss saw him one day, fired him on the spot. They did all kinds of things to make construction safe on this project. You'd be way up there, high up in the sky, and there'd be winds hitting you. So they had some kind of cream that you'd put on so you wouldn't get wind lacerations. They even went as far as having sauerkraut juice for people that were hungover in the morning. It was really, as comprehensive as it could be around safety. And the results were phenomenal. So for the first 3 years of this about 3.5-year effort, there were no fatalities whatsoever. Then one person died. It was an unfortunate accident. And finally, in the last several months, there was a real tragedy. A big sort of crane or something fell through, and it took 12 men with it down into the water. 10 of them survived. 10 of them died. 2 of them survived. So basically, total of 11 deaths on the project. Now, what do you think it was like when they started building the road part You know, what was it like to be on that bridge? What do you think these guys are thinking? All the way up there with nothing really down below. Look a little closer. Maybe fear? They don't want to fall, right? Probably pretty scary being up there, right? Actually, they weren't really scared at all because there was a net. The net cost 130,000 depressionary dollars. That's a lot of money back in the Depression. $130,000, okay? 19 people were saved by that net. They formed a club. They called it the Halfway to Hell Club. And they were, you know, basically the folks saved by the net. Now, some idiots just would jump in the net for fun. Those aren't counted in the Halfway to Hell Club. But it was so safe that they could do that occasionally and, you know, jump in. It was really extraordinary, okay? An extraordinary effort. It was on time and on budget and an amazing effort. Safety is freedom from unacceptable risk. Eric Honeygel is one of the leaders in the safety movement. I've been learning from these incredible minds in the safety movement. Okay, these are people that look at safety across all industries, whether it's aerospace, nuclear energy, doesn't make any difference. They're the ones looking at safety across industries. Brilliant minds. And we have a lot to learn from them in the software field. Safety is freedom from unacceptable risk. Habitual excellence requires protecting people. If you want to be habitually excellent as an organization, you have to protect people. That's the focus. 1930s as well. This was the construction of the RCA building in New York City, now called the GE building. This is a famous photo. They say it may have been staged, but of course, my point being it's extremely unsafe. There is no net here. This is how a lot of software development is done. We don't have a net. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of heroism, right? You have the heroes coming in to do things, and we say heroism is hazardous. If you have to rely on heroes working late nights and doing crazy things, that's a hazardous way of building software. And unfortunately in our industry, we rely on it too much. This is what it's like to be a software developer on a lot of projects. There aren't sufficient safety nets for us. We haven't really focused on protecting people. Now, I don't want you to think this is just about the people building the software. We also have to focus on the people using the software, right? This giant breach of iCloud recently for some Hollywood actresses, that is Apple not protecting people, right? So it's the users, it's the entire ecosystem of people involved in software development that need to be protected if you're going to be habitually excellent. James Reason, another giant mind in the safety field, said the partnership between production and protection is rarely equal. What does he mean? Okay, so this is production down here. This is protection over here. Okay, if you focus all of your efforts on protection and never actually build anything, you don't do anything productive, well, you'll be bankrupt. But if you ignore protection altogether and just do production, production, production with no safety, well, you'll probably have a catastrophe. Ideally, you have this parity, right? You're following that parity. Now, in most organizations, my own included, we will have a certain degree of protection, but then over time, we start to forget about it. We focus more on production until some accident, some problem occurs, right? And then we say, oh God, you know what? We're not investing enough in protection. Let's have more protection. And then several months pass, things fade down, and we have another problem. And as you can imagine, this continues. Looks like that, maybe a bigger problem. We go back and forth with where the organization remembers or forgets to pay attention to protection and find this sort of parity line. But for many companies, they spend a lot of time in here dealing with problems. This is this tension between protection and production. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have a net? Are we protected? The people working on the Golden Gate Bridge were not afraid to lose their life. They were extraordinarily productive because of that. If you are afraid that you're going to die when you come to work, you're not going to be very productive. Okay? We don't have deaths when we're building software for the most part, but we do have lots and lots of issues and problems that are injuries, what we would call injuries, right? They're software development injuries. So, example, exceptions in our logs, severe exceptions, right? In our own e-learning software, we had some. Now, our software, I think, is very high quality. We test drove all of it, and yet we had a very obscure concurrency problem, okay? And there were some exceptions in our logs. 237 of them we found one day in the production log files, right? So the system's running, everything's good, but it's generating exceptions occasionally into the log file. We looked at it and said, oh my gosh, look, this screencast download action is causing some problems. What's happening here? All right, some of you were in my session yesterday, heard me talk about this, so I don't want to repeat too much, but effectively, here's a problem. This is in production, on production machines, production log files, right? Now, when we're developing software, the software looks like this, right? The tool we use happens to be Eclipse at the time. The software looks like this. Do you see any problems here? Now, I'm not asking you to be Java experts, but there's a problem here.
No error.
There's 237 exceptions in production, but if you look at this, everything looks fine, right? Looks perfectly fine. It should look like this. There's yellow tape downstairs today. Did you all notice that when you came in? They have yellow tape around half of the front part of your building. You can't walk through it. Where's the yellow tape for the 237 exceptions in the production logs? Where is our yellow tape? Where are we saying, hey, this is a hazardous part of your code base? And maybe you shouldn't work on the next backlog item. Maybe this is more important. But we're not really that focused on protection sufficiently. It's all production, production, production. We want to change that. We think it's important to change that. Because if you're dealing with this kind of problem all the time, you can't really get ahead. Many shops we go to, they have lots of bugs. They fix a bug and generate 2 or 3 more. It seems like it's common. Okay, that's not a good way to develop software. All right. How about this problem? This is where we have, made our deadline. Somebody's really happy. But these people are pretty miserable. Does anyone, I don't know if you've experienced that here. Some places I go, I've experienced that problem. These people are exhausted, they're stressed out, their health is declining, maybe their relationships at home are declining. They're not doing too well. And it's pretty common in our industry. It's not sustainable. Okay, that's a problem. Feature usage, okay, I mean, it's pathetic that we don't even instrument our software, so we have no idea who's using what feature. And if some features are never being used at all. Are we protecting our time and money? Are we protecting our budgets by building software that barely anyone is using? If we don't instrument our software to know if it's even being used, how can we say we're protecting our resources, protecting our budgets? It's absurd. It's 2014 already, for God's sakes. What are we doing? We're just guessing at what we need to build. So we're not protecting ourselves there either. We have complex software. We have complex queries. We have complex algorithms, right? They are hazardous. when very few others can actually work with that software. You get one guy in the organization, one person in the organization who can figure this thing out. That is a disaster waiting to happen. That person leaves, you have no way to work with that code, right? This happens all the time. We don't accept it. We take something like this, we say, you know what, let's rewrite it so that anyone could work with it, because it's hazardous. Branches, boy, a lot of our customers deal with horrendous problems with branching software, all kinds of branches of the version control. It's a disaster, right? They're afraid to merge and leads to all kinds of problems. I showed this yesterday. It's a 28-page method or function, 28 pages long. It's so complex. It has a state called unknown. They don't know how they get into that state, so it's a state machine. And horrendous complexity, the cause of many, many bugs in their software. But this is common. I show this to you like, oh yeah, we have a giant method too. You know, these are things that are just very, very hard to maintain and work with. And of course, then we have production outages. Any of you, have you ever had a production outage here? Something goes down? Does that happen?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically that's really nightmarish, isn't it? It's really difficult to work with. Now, Paul O'Neill is one of my absolute new heroes. Okay, Paul O'Neill is actually the Secretary of the Treasury in 2000. Prior to that, he was the CEO of Alcoa, the aluminum company of America. Alcoa makes the aluminum in my MacBook Pro. It makes the aluminum in the Tesla. It makes the aluminum in the airplanes that we fly in. There are aluminums everywhere. So what blew me away about Paul O'Neill was the story. It's the story of what he did at Alcoa. Now, Alcoa invented the aluminum smelting process in 1887. Okay? Fast forward 100 years to 1987. And they're not doing too well. They became a monopoly in the early 20s and 30s. Eventually, the US government had to break them up a little bit because no one could compete with Alcoa. So after that, several decades passed, and by the early 1980s, they had union problems, quality problems with their aluminum. They had crazy fluctuating prices in the aluminum market. They had no innovation whatsoever. They weren't innovating. And their competitors were really hurting them. So they basically said to Paul O'Neill, you know, who was on the board for 1 year, they said, hey, Paul, could you run Alcoa? And Paul agreed to do it. Okay? Now, what Paul O'Neill did was he said, I'm going to make Alcoa the safest place to work in the world. I'm going for 0 injuries. This was really extraordinarily weird for a CEO to say this, particularly on Wall Street. There were literally Wall Street analysts who left the building as quickly as possible and said to their clients, sell Alcoa. Sell the stock right now. They hired this crazy madman who's talking about worker safety. He's not talking about increasing profits and decreasing expenses and not paying taxes. That's what most CEOs are supposed to do. He's talking about worker safety. Sell the stock. Turns out that was that would be really bad advice to follow. Recordables are things that happen when you injure yourself in a manufacturing setting. You have to record it, okay? And it's called a recordable. I'm not talking about a mosquito bite, something that's significant, right? Broken finger, a burn, whatever it was. Recordables. Lost work days, you can't come to work because you are injured. You're sick. Something happened. Starting from 1987, when Paul got there, here's what happened. Huge reduction in recordables and lost work days. But as I told you, Paul O'Neill, this maverick leader, he left in 2000. So there he is. And in 2000, he got tapped to be the US Secretary of the Treasury. So Paul goes away. What do you think happens next? Goes back up, right? Because normally when the maverick leader leaves, it goes back to the way it was. Here's what happened. Paul O'Neill changed the DNA of Alcoa, okay? He didn't just, lead everybody, and then when he left, it all went back to normal. He had totally changed the DNA of the company. They asked him in 2000, they said, Paul, were you successful at Alcoa? Now, he was enormously successful. I'm about to show you revenue numbers. But he said, I'll only know after I left if the trends continue. Profits increase, and we get to safer and safer and safer operations, which is exactly what happened. More stats about what he did. It's phenomenal achievement. Revenue from 87 to 2012. Okay, again, this was remarkable. It's an absolutely incredible number in the billions. The dips typically are related to recessions, and Alcoa is on the top of their game now. They're now the best-selling pickup truck in America, the Ford F-150, is now all aluminum, Alcoa aluminum. After 20 years of trying to make the entire body of a truck, they've managed to do it. So now Alcoa is basically making automobiles for GM, Ford, and other companies. It's amazing. So an incredible achievement. And I could go on and on about Alcoa. I used to have many slides about it. I had to, edit them down, but there's a lot of great stories there, okay? Suffice it to say, workers loved him. Everybody loved him because he was protecting the workers. And as a result, innovation flourished, quality went up, they were much more productive. It was an amazing turnaround for a 100-year-old company, right? I've gone to companies and said, wow, it's 20 years old, it's a lot of built-up culture. How are we going to, help them change? Well, Paul did this with a 100-year-old company. There were workers who were proud of their scars. There were generations of Alcoans saying, yeah, no, you're going to get hurt on the job. Look at my scars. And he had to change that. And he did. He said, safety is a precondition, not a priority. Priorities change, right? In business, priorities change all the time. He said, it's not a priority, it's a precondition. We are going to make it safe to work here. Now, you have to start translating this to our environment. We're not making aluminum. We're not building a bridge. But the same lessons can be applied to our world. And I think the results will be amazing. So far, in my experience so far, it's been incredible. Anzen. I decided to start using this term. It's a Japanese word. There's kind of when you become a consultant, you sort of have to figure out, which Japanese words you're going to use. So Anzen was not being used. I thought, okay, I've signed the oath of being a consultant. I need my own Japanese word to use to apply to my ideas. So Anzen was that word. Now, seriously, I did run into a problem with the word safety. It's unexpected, but I was using the word safety. I was working with a large manufacturer of tractors in the middle of the United States, and they basically took issue with one of my speech titles. They said, Josh, you can't say safety in the title of your speech. I was like, what? They said, oh, safety means something here for like building the tractors, and we have OSHA, and we have lawyers, and it's really this thing about safety, but you can't really talk about it with software. I was floored, but basically I went there and talked about safety anyway, and I realized, you know what, I'm not going to fight that battle. I'm going to use a Japanese word. So Anzen is that word. It means safety in Japan, so it means safety. Anzeneering, these are the people doing Anzen, bringing safety to software development, okay? Anzeneering, engineering safety into everything we do. Let's get deeper into that. What are the shields of Anzen? We have protection of our money. We have to protect money. It's very important. We can't just spend it and feel good about that. It's got to be protected. We have to protect time. You can't build a giant software project and find that it's not what people wanted. That's not protecting your time. You wasted your time. You have to protect people's information, right? iCloud, letting someone try to log into Jennifer Lawrence's account by typing in the username and password thousands of times, that's not protecting people's information. Sorry. Reputation, right? You can get a bad reputation from, in our case, we once sold a lot of software to a person, and that person didn't really successfully get other folks to use it. It became shelfware. I think we hurt that person's reputation. So reputations are quite important. You have to protect them. Relationships are important, right? You have to actually have safe relationships, harmonious relationships. Protect those relationships. And finally, health. We don't talk enough about health in our field. In our shop, we have stand-up desks. We focus on exercise. There's a lot of focus on health because even in the software field, there's a lot of problems with this area. So these are 6 shields that we felt were really important to protect people. Okay. Now, back in the days of the Trojans, they had a certain a rule. You could lose your helmet, you could lose your breastplate, but if you lost your shield, there were some really major penalties for you because the shield was part of the line. The shield was not just for your protection, it was for everyone else's protection. It was the thing that helped protect the group. So don't you lose your shield, all right? And that speaks to this. This is, when we talk about safety and protection, it's typically not just for me, the individual, it's for my group. It's for everybody, right? We're looking at reciprocal safety. Something that is safe for me has to be safe for others too. Otherwise, it's not genuine safety. So Anzeneering is the practice of protecting people, whether that's protecting their money, their time, their health, information, reputation, or their relationships. You're looking at protecting people. It's not this, right? I'm talking about protection, 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 but this is crazy. This is overprotection, right? This is, some people have written books about this. One book by Paul Bronson is called Nurture Shock, where kids are being so helicopter parented that they can't possibly take any risks. This is not what I'm talking about. Anzeneering is not 100% defensive. It's also not this. This was from the 14th century, the Battle of Agincourt. At this time in the history of military, the French fighting the English, the French armor got so thick that if you fell off your horse, you couldn't get back up. This is where the protection you've created for yourself is actually harming you. And that can happen too. We've heard of people say, oh, I'm not going to write those automated tests because, whenever I change the software, the tests break. And it's a nightmare. Forget the automated tests. Well, actually, you didn't learn how to write good automated tests that are resilient to change. So you just don't understand how to write good automated tests yet. But for you, that person experiences something similar to this. The defense is actually harming them. That's not real Anzeneering either. When I take my youngest daughter, climbing, we have all kinds of safety. She's got a harness on. I've got a harness on. I've got the rope. There are people in that gym, that climbing gym, who walk around and occasionally look at our harness and see if it's on correctly. One particular day, I had it on backwards, so I had to change it. Right? There's lots of safety happening in a climbing gym, and as a result, my daughter she goes up really high and starts swinging up there and doing all kinds of things, so she's completely safe. She's safe to fail. She also likes to climb trees without any harness, and this can give you a little heartburn, but she loved that, and she was taking an acceptable risk as far as she was concerned, as far as we were concerned. So not taking risks is riskier than playing it safe, right? Anzeneering is not about playing it safe and living in a cave and never taking any chances. That would be a mistake, right? Alcoa spent 20 years to develop the aluminum vehicle. A lot of 20 years of lots of failures until they finally nailed it. It's a very hard thing to do. You don't mold aluminum like you mold steel, right? So Anzeneering is not all defensive. There's offense as well, but it's offense where it's an acceptable risk. Never place a worker only one defense away from failure. This is something that has fundamentally changed the way I manage. I start to look at our process and say, okay, how are we defending ourselves against being injured, right? How are we defending ourselves against being injured? What are the injuries? Well, I mean, if a user of our software has a problem, we've injured them. If a developer does something innocently and breaks something major, we've injured that developer. The developer fell into a trap. They did something and it backfired badly on them. They feel awful. They're injured, psychologically injured. We got to look at our defenses and see, are we appropriately protecting people? One way to look at this is the Swiss cheese model. This is James Reason again. Okay, he basically said we have these defenses. They're like Swiss cheese. What happens is sometimes the defense gets weak and a little hole opens up. And if holes open up in multiple defenses and they somehow align, you can have an accident. You can have a problem, right? When you have a site outage, usually it's a result of numerous problems all lining up together to cause the thing to go down. So the Swiss cheese model is useful because you can begin to think about where are these potential holes in your defenses? Where are there weaknesses in your defenses? Safety is the presence of defenses, not the absence of events. Events is the term in the safety field for accidents or problems or fatalities, whatever happens. It's an event. We look at the presence of defenses. So one problem we run into in companies is it's not all about the software and all that stuff. A lot of it tends to be about how we interact with each other, right? What do we say to each other? The way people work together in the company, in the organization. Mixed messages are poison to creating a safe culture. A mixed message, here's a mixed message. Friends of the environment. And look how much they're dumping into the river there, right? Mixed messages. I say one thing, but I do something else. Mixed messages can really destroy a safety culture. If you're trying to produce safety, but you do one thing, you say one thing and do another, you're going to have problems. I say mixed messages, they manufacture mediocrity and mistrust. So a big part of this is psychological. For example, the company could say, yeah, we take people's safety seriously at this company. We care about your safety. Yet this guy just injured his eye on the bandsaw. What happened? How did this occur? Oh, let's investigate. Wait a minute. There are goggles here, but they're in disrepair. In fact, no one even bothers to use them anymore. They're falling apart. Why is that? Let's keep going. Oh, maybe management is not so focused on safety, even though they say they are. Maybe they're preoccupied with profits and loss or something like that, which is understandable. But if we want to understand how did this injury occur, we need to look at the big picture. We need to say, there was an active failure by a worker on the production line, right? But if we want to investigate it, let's look back at where it originated. And maybe we could find latent conditions, things that are basically in the environment, decisions that were made years ago, right? Maybe there was a focus 5 years earlier on safety, and then it waned, like we saw with that tension between protection and production. So that focus on safety waned, and then all of a sudden we have this problem. And you can come back to, oh, decisions were made to focus elsewhere. That is, safety was a priority, not a precondition, and the priority changed. And since the priority changed, we have this active failure. Instead of blaming the worker, we can look back and see what might have led to this, what conditions led to it. Active failures are like mosquito bites. You can hate the mosquitoes all you want, but typically it's the swamp that you have to worry about, right? You really need to drain the swamp if you're going to get rid of the mosquitoes. Okay, anyone heard of Etsy? Right, Etsy? Really great website. They sell all kinds of arts and crafts. People make these things all around the world and they sell them. Did you know they had a site outage? The site went down completely. What happened? Oh, well, a developer they had just hired, he'd been on the job for 4 days. He accidentally deleted a CSS file for Internet Explorer. And the whole thing got pushed to production. And guess what happened? There's an error page that shows up. But that error page also relied on the CSS file, which wasn't there. So it led to this crazy infinite loop, and the whole site came down. The guy's on the job for 4 days. What do you think happened to him? Anybody?
Move to management?
Not exactly. Any other thoughts? What happened?
Fired.
Fired? No. In fact, he got the 3-armed sweater award, which is offered once a year to the most spectacular failure, but it's a congratulatory thing. Okay, people came up to him and said, you know, you exposed a weakness in our defenses. We should never have had the error page rely on a CSS file, for example. It should just be independent, static page. It can show up in any context. Thank you for doing that. Awesome job. Welcome to the company, by the way. That's their culture at Etsy. They have an incredible safety culture at Etsy. I would call them Anzeneers. Okay, they call them blameless postmortems. When you have a retrospective or postmortem at Etsy, it's called a blameless postmortem. It's blameless. There's no blame going around. The old way of doing things is this blame game, right? Blaming gets you nowhere. Understand failure for what you can learn, not who you can blame. It's all about what we can learn about our defenses or lack thereof. Old view is this sort of blaming, disciplining people, retraining them, or firing them. That's the old way. New way, learn from failure, build better defenses. Really quickly, this woman, Amy Edmondson at Harvard, she's been studying teams. And my question to you is, who makes more mistakes? A well-led team with good relationships or a poorly led team with poor relationships? Which one do you think? How many people think it's the well-led teams with good relationships? Show of hands. How many people think it's the poorly led teams with poor relationships? Yeah, many more hands here. The answer is the well-led teams. Why is that? You tell me. Why would that be the case? They can take risks. They're actually psychologically safe to say, yeah, we made some mistakes. These folks here, what do?
They live in a cave.
They hide. They hide their mistakes. They won't even report them out. So if you want to know how many mistakes they made, you're really going to have no idea because they don't even feel safe enough to report them. There's a lack of safety there. And Amy said, people are impression managers. They're managing impressions all the time. What impression do others have of me or my team? Right? And a lot of what happens is people hide behind certain facades. They don't really say what's on their mind. If you're going to build great software and you find there's risks and you don't say anything because you don't feel safe to speak up, you got a problem. This guy, what is he thinking? Are you free to express relevant thoughts and feelings? Maybe not. Maybe you don't feel free to do that. Is raising a dissenting view expected and welcomed? Or are you just trying to have an echo chamber where everyone agrees? Can you have productive conflicts, challenges, and disagreements? Can you expect that at work, where they're productive? Is being yourself encouraged? So some of the things we're doing, we've been doing for many, many years, is we work in teams, we work together very closely. There's lots of collaboration. Okay, you get to know each other, you swap pairs and move around, and everyone gets to really work closely together. We no longer work in cubes or silos. Even we work across the world doing distributed pairing and mobbing and working together. For safety, we do continuous deployment. We've been doing this for 5 years now. It's a way of basically making a safety net for deployment to say, if I'm going to release to production, I want to ensure that it's safe. So I'm going to make an effort to do that. So, when we implemented this 5 years ago, our stress declined significantly. Significantly, our stress went down. It was no longer, and we used to release every couple of, once or twice a week. Now we can release 10 times a day without even thinking about it. Some people say, don't release on a Friday afternoon. Dangerous. We do that all the time because it's safe to release. We sometimes had exceptions in the production logs. We looked at them, we said, we are going to fundamentally deal with this and get those logs to be quiet. Right? That's a prioritization decision we made. We said it's critical for us to deal with this problem, because otherwise we're seeing noise in our email. Oh, there's another exception, another problem. So we made a decision not to build something and instead to kill off those exceptions. We created the Stop Work Authority card. I have some of them I brought with me today if you want one. This is a card that any of our employees have, and they can hold it up at any time and say, stop. You're doing something fundamentally unsafe. Stop working. Everyone in our company has the authority to pull out this card. It's the equivalent of the Anzen cord in Toyota. An Anzen cord, you pull the cord, the production line stops. Right? Well, in the safety field, it's called the Stop Work Authority. And everyone in the company has it. Employees have used this on me. Employees have used this on each other in my company. It's been phenomenally successful. Okay, so I have some if you want to grab one and take a look later. We do something called tailboarding. I learned this from the safety field as well. Tailboarding, what is it? Well, when crews go out, let's say an electrical crew goes out to do some work on the electrical cables, right? They've already been schooled in safety, but now they're on a specific job where there might be some local hazards there, and they're going to have a quick meeting to discuss what are the possible risks, what are the hazards, and how could we safely deal with them for this job. So tailboarding, in our Kanban board, we do Kanban, we have a tailboard lane. And anything that's going to go from to-do into in-process has to go through the tailboarding. We have to be able to, together as a group, talk about the possible hazards and how to work safely. Right? We could easily deliver something and it breaks an IE. Happens all the time. How do we deal with that? Do props. People like to be recognized for the work they're doing. They like to be acknowledged for great stuff. We use a product called Do Props. It's a website, doprops.com, and it allows us to thank people for doing great work. Okay. Now, this is going to lead to Paul O'Neill's stuff, so I am going to just plug this in real quick. I have a couple of videos to share with you. Job safety analysis is the final thing I want to mention. In dangerous fields, they do job safety analysis. They say, okay, so if you're going to do this job, let's analyze how to be safe when you're doing the job. And they do an extensive analysis of what does safety mean to work in that particular job. It's fascinating. So I actually had someone working for me, and I asked her to sort of organize some open enrollment workshops. And I kind of briefed her on how to do them and stuff like that, but I realized after a little while that this is really dangerous. She can waste a lot of money and time. She can injure our reputation. She can not get enough people into the open enrollment. It's actually a really dangerous job. And where is the job safety analysis? I have a lot of experience doing these things myself, but it's not recorded. It's not in some place where I can share it in a way to say, here's how to do it safely. And I realized I was putting her in a very unsafe position. So this, to me, is becoming golden for providing safety, job safety analysis. Now, Paul O'Neill has 3 questions that he asks to see if you're becoming habitually excellent. And for him, habitual excellence is completely related to safety. So the 3 questions. Let's see if this works.
So in an organization, I believe it has the potential for greatness. Those guarantees that have the potential for greatness.
In an organization that has the potential for greatness,
The people in the organization can say every day, without any reservation or hesitation, the yes to the 3 questions.
the people can say yes to 3 questions, okay? This is going to be the first question. Can you guys, is there a way to turn up the volume for this? Well, can you hear it? Not very well, I assume, right? Well, I'll repeat what he's saying then.
Here's the 3 questions. I'm treated every day with dignity and respect.
I'm treated every day with dignity and respect, regardless of
Everyone I encounter, without respect to my gender,
nationality, race,
or
my education,
or
my rank,
or any other discriminating qualifier.
I'm treated with dignity and respect every day. Okay, that's one of the first questions we ask. We did this in our company, and 86% of people said that is true. Not bad. We still have work to do. Second question.
I'm given the things that I need.
I'm given the things that I need. Tools, education, encouragement,
so that I can make a contribution that gives meaning to my life.
that gives meaning to my life. So that I can make a contribution that gives meaning to my life. Pretty profound. How do we do there? About the same. Okay. Third question. Every day I can say someone I care about. Someone I care about and respect noticed I did something. Recognition. Regular, meaningful, sincere recognition for something I did. Didn't do as well there. 79% said yes. And this is something we're regularly polling folks on in our company to see how we're doing and how we can improve. We're talking about, the ones who say no. Sometimes even the people who say yes, but, and so there's still more work to be done on these 3 questions, okay? It's, a bit tenuous. It's not as easy to connect this up to tailboarding. Tailboarding is a very specific practice. But these 3 questions really relate to the environment, the culture we have. So if we can get 100% yeses on all of these, we're probably doing something right. And probably people will be a lot happier working with us and being there and contributing. So that is Anzeneering, as much as I have to be able to tell it in 1 hour. And I hope to be writing about more of this and sharing more of what I'm learning. Happy to answer any questions. Yes?
I'm fascinated by this. I think that when you start, if you're new to this, in a corporation or any side of business, the balance is so tricky because I think at first you might start to be a little too protective or too defensive if you really embrace it. And how do you manage that kind of the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, when you first start doing this, you may focus on being too protective, right? What we found was, when we first started doing it, we made a list of injuries, and it was gigantic. It was so big that it was unmanageable. And then we dealt with the, basically saying we want to be safe, but we weren't able to like fix all of those injuries so quickly. So some folks started to feel like we were sending a mixed message, right? We're all about safety, but the thing you contributed to the list, the thing that injures you, we're not able to tackle it because we are the number of people we are, and we can only take on so much. It was really challenging. We had to set some really clear understandings of what can we actually take on, because there's just so much to do. But what you really want to look at is where are the biggest hazards that can affect a lot of people, right? And how can you go after those? We've done things like around the holidays say, well, what if that server went down? Or do we have good replication, or do we just infrastructure safety? Lots of things that could easily slip through the cracks and never make it onto a backlog. We now look at and say, yeah, we're gonna invest in fixing that. We're gonna make that safe. But it's a journey. It really is a journey. It takes time to do it. The general feeling though is people love it. They can sleep easier at night. They feel like we're doing the right thing. Other questions? I have a question for you. Can you do this here at the Fed Reserve? Or are you already doing things like this that are helping you create a greater degree of safety here? Yeah.
Well, our Gopa, who is the head of our IT department here, always says fail early, fail fast.
Yes.
So I think teams are trying to feel better about taking risks and seeing that something doesn't work.
Right.
I think it's something that's building in the culture.
Because it's safer to fail fast than it is to fail late, right? You don't want to fail months and months into a project. It's better to fail in the first couple of weeks and learn, right? That's a great example. Yes?
Yes, a lot of this is very good ideas and things to practice. But the moment we leave the room, right now everybody's hot in the head. Everybody goes back to their original behavior.
Right.
So how do we, any thoughts, recommendations on, how to practice this going forward?
I think you need to talk about it in your organization and see if there's an interest in it, especially at the highest levels, right? Paul O'Neill does not believe this can really be done from the grassroots. There are people that think that it can be. I think I agree with Paul O'Neill. I think there has to be a desire for it at the highest levels to support it, right? Paul O'Neill went to every single Alcoa factory around the globe, and he said to people, if there's something that is unsafe, you bring it up with your manager, and they ignore you, here's my home phone number, call me. A few months later, a guy in Alabama was being asked to move stuff. There was a conveyor belt. 3 sections of the conveyor belt. The middle section was broken. So they were being asked to move the materials from one conveyor belt to another, since the middle one was broken. And he thought he was going to hurt his back. He hadn't hurt his back yet, but he thought he was going to. He mentioned it to the manager. The manager said, no, keep moving the stuff. So he called Paul O'Neill. It was 11 p.m. at night where Paul O'Neill lived. And Paul said, thank you for calling. And Paul called the plant manager, said, you stop that right now, get that conveyor belt fixed. And I think at 3 o'clock in the morning, he got a call saying it's been fixed. That kind of story circulates. And people realize that they're empowered to make the workplace safer. Everyone there was empowered to make the workplace safer. Workers would have posters of Paul O'Neill picture in their lockers because they loved him so much. How often does that happen? It's just remarkable because he empowered them to make their workplace safer. And it was all the way up the chain. Everyone was focused on this. It made a fundamental difference. Imagine you're bringing safety to everything you're doing on the software projects here at the Fed Reserve. From the lowest levels of code all the way up to how you're managing your projects and spending money, right? And all the way out to what are you doing for the users of your software? How are you protecting them? That can have a profound effect. But I believe it really does have to be something that's coordinated and valued. It becomes a precondition, not a priority. Can it become a precondition here? Well, I think you have to start to ask for that, talk about it, make it something real. You can begin with these little stop work authority cards and maybe using them every now and then might get things started. That's the grassroots way. But I think to make a fundamental change, it's going to be something leadership cares about. Okay, well, I think we're out of time. Thanks, everybody.